The converse, inverse, and contrapositive of an if-then statement. Yan ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon dito sa ating matsayang talakayan. Kaya, stay tuned! Hello, grade 8 learners! For today's video, we will discuss the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of an if-then statement. At the end of this video, you are going to determine the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of a statement. Now, what is a converse? The converse of a conditional statement is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and the conclusion. In conditional statement, if P, then Q. For the converse statement, if Q, then P. So, ibig sabihin, pagbabaliktarin lang natin yung hypothesis at yung conclusion. Example, in the given conditional statement, if you live in Tarlac, then you live in Luzon. In this statement, we have the pattern if P, then Q. P is the hypothesis, you live in Tarlac, and the conclusion Q is you live in Luzon. So, for its converse, if Q then P, if you live in Luzon, then you live in Tarlac. Another example, in the conditional statement, if two lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular. So this is written as if P, then Q. So ano ang P natin dyan or the hypothesis? Correct. The hypothesis is two lines intersect to form right angles. How about the Q or the conclusion? Yes, you're right. The conclusion is they are perpendicular. So, when we write in converse, so you have if Q, then P. Now, you have if two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form right angles. Okay, so hindi natin isinama yung word na two lines para maging maayos yung ating statement. Example number 3. If two angles are congruent, then they have the same measure. So this statement is written as if P then Q. So you are now going to write the statement as if Q then P, since that is the converse. So what's your answer? The correct answer is if two angles have the same measure, then they are congruent. Good job! Next, if a figure is a square, then it is a parallelogram. So this statement is written as if P then Q. So you are now going to write in if Q then P. So your answer is correct. If it is a parallelogram, then a figure is a square. Now that you know how to get the converse of a statement, so let us have the inverse. What is inverse? The inverse of a conditional is formed by negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion. When we say negating, it is the negation of a statement is the opposite of the original statement. So, ibig sabihin, kukunin natin yung opposite term of the original statement. So, when we get the negation of the original statement, we usually affix the word not. Now, if you have the conditional statement as if P then Q, so in the inverse statement, you will have if not P, then not Q. Example. Given the conditional statement, if two lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular. So this statement is written as if P, then Q. Now its inverse, you have if not P, then not Q. So its inverse is if two lines do not intersect to form right angles, then they are not perpendicular. Always remember the use of word not when we negate. Next example. If two angles are congruent, then they have the same measure. So this statement is written as if P, then Q. We will write this statement as if not P, then not Q. So its inverse is, yes, you're right. If two angles are not congruent, then they do not have the same measure. Next example. If a figure is a square, then it is a parallelogram. This statement is in the form if P, then Q. So let's get its inverse. Its inverse must be if not P, then not Q. What is its inverse? Okay, correct. So its inverse is if a figure is not a square, then it is not a parallelogram. Excellent, grade 8. So let's now proceed to contrapositive. What is contrapositive? The contrapositive of a conditional is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and the conclusion and negating both. So ibig sabihin, from the conditional statement or the original statement, kukunin natin yung kanyang converse. At yung converse ng isang statement ang ininegate natin. So, we have the pattern in the conditional statement, if P then Q, get its converse. If Q then P, then negate the converse. So, you will get the contrapositive. So, its contrapositive is if not Q, then not P. Example, in conditional statement, if two lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular. So, this is the original statement written as if P, then Q. When we get its converse, if two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form right angles. So, that is written as if Q, then P. Now, to get the contrapositive of the statement, we will negate the converse. So, the negation of the converse is if not Q, then not P. What is now your answer? Great job! Your answer is, if two lines are not perpendicular, then they do not intersect to form right angles. Another example. If a figure is a square, then it is a parallelogram. That is the original statement or the conditional statement written as if P then Q. And its converse, if it is a parallelogram, then a figure is a square. So that is if Q, then P. Now, get the contrapositive of the statement. Using the pattern, if not Q, then not P. So the contrapositive is, if it is not a parallelogram, then a figure is not a square. Next example, if two angles are congruent, then they have the same measure. So that is in the form if P, then Q. In its converse, if two angles have the same measure, then they are congruent. So that is if Q, then P. Now, what is the contrapositive of this statement? Just write the converse in the form if not Q, then not P. So the answer is, if two angles do not have the same measure, then they are not congruent. Now, let us transform the statement into its converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So given the conditional statement or the if-then form, if a pentagon is regular, then it is equiangular. What is its converse? The correct answer is, if a pentagon is equiangular, then it is regular. How about its inverse? Correct. The inverse is, if a pentagon is not regular, then it is not equiangular. And for the contrapositive, the answer is, if a pentagon is not equiangular, then it is not regular. Great job, grade 8. There are cases that statements are not written in if-then form. So, let us write statements in if-then form, then get its converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Example number 1. An even number is divisible by 2. So to write in if-then form, let us first identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. What is the hypothesis? The hypothesis is an even number. And how about the conclusion? The conclusion is divisible by 2. So in if-then form, we have, if it is an even number, then it is divisible by 2. Now, what is its converse? Excellent! The converse statement is, if a number is divisible by 2, then it is an even number. How about its inverse? Inverse is negating the original statement. So we have, if it is not an even number, then it is not divisible by 2. How about the contrapositive? Correct. Its contrapositive is, if a number is not divisible by 2, then it is not an even number. Now, let's try another. Equilateral triangles are equiangular. What is its if-then form? Great! The if-then form is, if triangles are equilateral, then they are equiangular. How about the converse statement? Its converse statement is, if triangles are equiangular, then they are equilateral. And its inverse? Correct. The inverse is, if triangles are not equilateral, then they are not equiangular. And for the contrapositive, so we have, if triangles are not equiangular, then they are not equilateral. Another one. All squares are rhombuses. Again, all squares are rhombuses. So in if-then form, what's your answer? Your answer should be, if a figure is a square, then it is a rhombus. How about the converse? Correct. The converse is, if a figure is a rhombus, then it is a square. And for its inverse, so we have, if a figure is not a square, then it is not a rhombus. And finally, for the contrapositive, the answer is, if a figure is not a rhombus, then it is not a square. So to sum up, for the lesson that we have, when we write a statement in if-then form, we are going to have the pattern, if P, then Q. In converse statement, the pattern is, if Q, then P. And for the inverse statement, we have, if not P, then not Q. And for its contrapositive, if not Q, then not P. Wherein, P is the hypothesis and Q is the conclusion. Great job, grade 8. Now that you learned a lot, you have to get your paper and pen. Then, do this activity. Write the if-then statement and its converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the statement. Right angles are 90 degrees. So what is its if-then form? Its converse, its inverse, and contrapositive. And that's for today, guys. Mag-practice at magtiyaga upang lalong maging galing. Again, this is Teacher Dali na nagsasabing, practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching!